the cannabis market is perhaps 10%, maybe 5% therapeutic, 95% recreational. I would say for psychedelics, the other way around, right? It's going to be 90% therapeutic and probably 10% recreational.
You're listening to Kerry Lutz's Financial Survival Network, where you get valuable information you just can't find anywhere else. To thrive in today's trying times, you need the Financial Survival Network, now more than ever. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and get your free newsletter and gift. Financial Survival Network, now more than ever.
And welcome. You are listening to and watching the Financial Survival Network. I'm your host, Kerry Lutz. Hey, there's all sorts of new novel treatments coming out for many things. There's a mental health crisis in North America, probably across the planet, and we have done very little at addressing this concern. And just look at the number of homeless people in urban areas throughout not just the United States, but North America, around the world. And imagine if there was some inexpensive and widely tested drugs that could help solve this mental crisis, this mental health crisis. How much would society benefit from that? Well, Benjamin Lightburn is with us now, and he is the CEO of Filament Health. That's FILAMENT.health. It's publicly traded company, FH. It's on the CBOE of Canada. Ben, it's great to have you on the show. So psychedelics treating these widespread mental health issues, relatively new approach, seems to be effective in many cases, doesn't it?
It does seem to be effective, but I actually want to correct you. It's not very new, right? So when you think about humans using psychedelics for various purposes, there's documented evidence of this going back for thousands of years, right? Be it spiritual, cultural, shamanistic things. You can see mushroom statues in Mesoamerica. You can see cave paintings of magic mushrooms, things like that. And in fact, even in the modern era, we did actually have psychedelics in relatively wide use in the beginning in the 30s, 40s, and 50s and 60s, until, of course, that was all shut down once the kind of genie got out of the bottle and the psychedelic movement became associated with the counterculture and the anti-war movement. And then, of course, we had the war on drugs and basically the criminalization of all drug-related activity. But you are definitely right in posing the question, what kind of harm to society might have been avoided if we had had broader access to these substances for the last 5 or so decades. But in any event, in the last few years, maybe in the last decade or so, we have seen a very strong resurgence in the amount of research and the amount of studies being done with these substances. And in some cases, you're even seeing certain jurisdictions allow people to be medically treated with these substances in a kind of like pre-approval early access basis. So it is definitely a very exciting time for the psychedelics industry, and hopefully a very exciting time for society as certain of these psychedelic substances look to be approved as drugs over the next couple of years.
So interesting. So tell us results treating mental health issues, how effective psychedelics have been, and how effective are they compared to other approaches?
Great question. So far, the indication, the disease areas that are most advanced in clinical development would be PTSD and depression, MDMA in the case of PTSD, and psilocybin for depression. In the first case, we're seeing roughly like a 60% remission rate for people with PTSD, which is very, very high considering there really are slim to no approved therapies for people currently suffering from PTSD. So it's very, very, very promising. And it's important to remember that these drugs are always given in conjunction with some form of therapy or psychological support. Like it's not as if, very sick people are being given powerful hallucinogenic substances and just told to go on their merry way and hope for the best, right? There's always, strict procedures and protocols in place to ensure the safety of everybody, really. In the area of depression, you're seeing big reduction of depression scores after 3 weeks or 12 weeks, whatever the case may be. Very, very promising, higher typically than what you would see for the predominant depression treatment, which is, of course, SSRIs. Many people are familiar with SSRIs because something like 15% of North Americans actually take them. These are drugs that you take every single day. They're drugs that often come with side effects like weight gain or sexual dysfunction or just general foggy headedness. And the other interesting thing about SSRIs is that they only have a 1/3 chance of working any given time around. And they only have a 65% chance of working even after attempting multiple different courses of SSRIs. And it takes a couple of months sometimes to become stable. So someone's journey to go through different SSRIs can actually last years. Whereas what we're talking about for psilocybin therapy is like a single dose and with therapy, and these can have effects that last for several months. In the area of substance use disorders, which is where Filament is focused, we're seeing very exciting research coming out. There was a big study that came from NYU where in alcohol use disorder, where they showed an 83% reduction in heavy drinking days amongst people who regularly abused alcohol. You have early data in smoking cessation. You also have preliminary data in cocaine use disorder, all of which are showing really just amazing results. And so, again, it's a very, very exciting time for psychedelics and maybe hopefully even for society as some of these drugs get approved over the next few years.
Interesting that substance abuse can really reduce. These SSRIs, after you take them for like 10 years, they cause many people to become bipolar as a result too, right?
Well, and they have, there's withdrawal symptoms, right? So if you try to get off or you try to switch, it's not necessarily straightforward. So it's SSRIs are a big issue. For
sure. And as far as other forms of therapy, talk therapy and all that, those have really low success rates, right?
We know that they work, but that their success can be limited, right? So really what we're talking about is a whole new treatment paradigm, right? It's a new thing, right? It's not, like you said, 1 hour a week of talking to a therapist. It's kind of like intensive therapy, a high dose of psilocybin, where you are, typically lying on a couch and somewhat incapacitated and left, to deal with your own thoughts. But people report that psychedelics have a way of showing you, things about yourself that you probably already knew deep down inside somewhere. But it's kind of like a tool which like shows you the way internally, right? And allows you to have, certain insights and discoveries about yourself that you may not otherwise have had.
Do we have any idea how these things actually work from a metabolic standpoint, or we just know from the results?
The short answer is no. The long answer is that there are many different things currently being hypothesized. The predominant theory is that they are serotonin receptor agonists. So they mimic serotonin in the brain and activate the serotonin receptors. And that is kind of what is thought to cause the flooding, feeling, the hallucinogenic, the response, the different visuals and auditory hallucinations. But there is research that shows that, maybe not research, but reports of certain people that have, not had these kinds of hallucinogenic responses and yet still had a therapeutic treatment outcome. Or there was this study that came out the other day in mice where they had mice that were genetically modified to not have 5-HT2A receptors, and yet they still exhibited antidepressant effects from psychedelics. So, like I said, the short answer is we don't actually really know why or how it works. But what we do know is that people that have these experiences, they regularly assign it as like the top one or two most impactful experiences of their entire life, right? They say doing this was similar to witnessing the birth of my child, or getting married, or watching a close friend die, or something like that, right? These experiences rank among the most important of people's lives.
Okay, so I'm just going to share something with you, my personal experience, not with hallucinogens, but weight loss drug, Ozempic. Okay, I took that, I was like 12, 13 pounds from my goal weight. And I just couldn't get rid of it. And I said, okay, I'm going to take it for 2-3 months. Hopefully not too bad side effects. But some of the unintended side effects, number one, I'm not a big drinker, but, a moderate drinker 2-3 times a week, 1 or 2 drinks. I found that it like cut that in half. And then for coffee, I was a pretty substantial coffee drinker, 2-3 cups a day. I'm down to 1 cup a day, and it's the weirdest thing. And because it's just like I had no desire to cut my alcohol consumption or my caffeine consumption, and yet it just made me not want it. Really strange here. And now they're saying it works for cocaine in certain people as well. So maybe some multifaceted type approach. I just think it's interesting that all these drugs are here and, they're being prescribed and used, and yet we don't really know what they do,
And it's a kind of like a theoretical question. How much do we need to know about how something works rather than if it works? Now, and just having the results. And this gets back to your question at the beginning, was about, well, how do you even do a placebo-controlled study with psychedelics? So the water is further muddied by the fact that you could claim that psychedelics don't in fact work, and that it's all just expectancy bias from the participants. So that is one further complication to the argument. Well, if it works, who cares how or why?
Yeah, if it's placebo, it's good placebo, right?
But it's unethical to prescribe people placebo, even if it's going to make them better.
Yeah. Well, there's a limit to double-blind studies. Like, they never did double-blind studies on parachutes. You really want to prove that parachutes save lives, then you should do a double-blind study. But nobody's jumping out of a plane without a parachute, right? So,
well, just like it's impossible to do research on what is the safe amount of alcohol for a pregnant woman to consume.
Right.
You can't prescribe one group to take tons of alcohol and another one to take no alcohol and figure out what's the safe limit. And so we assume that we just take the most safest case, which is that no alcohol is safe.
Right. And in this case, as long as we know the drugs are safe, right? I mean, bad trips and things like that, we don't so much see that with non-synthetic hallucinogens, do we?
Well, a lot of people actually would push back on the idea of bad trip, right? Because many people would say that it's actually the sort of like negative experiences and past traumatic experiences and all these kinds of things coming to the surface and having a challenging experience, that this may actually be the intended consequence of doing psilocybin therapy, right? So it's kind of like a no pain, no gain situation, right? Like if you have a lot of, baggage or, emotional trauma or things that are holding you back and causing you blockages, it does stand to reason that, to work through all this will be difficult and will be like people aren't, you don't really do like these high dose psychedelics. It's not really like fun. It's not really like recreational. It's not really like, hey, let's like eat some mushrooms and go into the woods and watch the Northern Lights. It's, this is definitely not that, right? This is like a tool that kind of forces you to confront your demons head on, and there's no escape. And so it can be very challenging and overwhelming. But many people would say that that's actually the very point of the whole exercise.
Hey, do people have psychotic breaks on these hallucinogens? Does that ever happen?
I think there have been one or two things that have been reported like that, but often you will see that this person may have had a predisposition to those occurrences, and so it may have actually just kind of like reawakened something that was dormant. You also have something called persistent hallucination disorder. So people that report like even a year after their psychedelic experience that they may have like little flashes of hallucination. So this is something that persists in a small fraction of people that undergo psychedelic therapy as well.
Wow. All right. Well, I think we've covered this topic. As far as the company goes, at what point does it become profitable and, start putting out sizable returns? What's the milestone for that, the catalyst?
So currently our drugs, we are in phase 2. And so we need to complete phase 2 and then complete phase 3. And then after that, we would be submitting a new drug application to begin marketing the drugs. So I would say probably a fair estimate would be 4 or 5 years away for us to finish all of that. But we've already been through all of the preclinical and phase 1. So we're marching right along. Another unique thing about our company is that because we manufacture our drugs naturally, and we were the first to do so, we've been able to claim a lot of very valuable IP. We have over 25 issued patents now. And what that's been able to do is allow us to enter into revenue generating licensing agreements. So unlike most kind of junior biotech companies, we actually are already revenue positive, revenue generating. We're not profitable yet, but there would be a path for us to generate significant revenues before actually getting our own drugs approved, which is quite a unique aspect of our business.
Yes, very much so. Hey, one final question for you, and that covers the topic of microdosing, which I know isn't related to what you're doing here, but I'm curious if there's been studies on microdosing, if it helps anymore, or whether you need the large dose to get the maximum benefit.
That is another one of the big unanswered questions in psychedelics, whether or not microdosing works. A lot of people swear by it, right? A lot of people say it really helps them. A lot of people say it saves their life. There hasn't been much good quality research done on microdosing, especially in people who are sick, right? Where you can actually measure outcomes. We actually have a couple of microdosing studies where we're supplying drugs to, which will hope to overcome this deficiency in the microdosing research. So I would say the jury is still out there. Most people would probably say, most like scientific researchers would probably say there's not really any evidence to support it. But, people on the street, a lot of people out there swear by it. And if it does work, it would be huge because it's much easier for people to take a once a day small dose that they barely feel than it is for them to take like a very high dose that requires supervision and needs to be in kind of like a semi-medical setting.
Sure. I find the whole thing fascinating. It's a shame that all the research into psychedelics was basically halted in the 60s due to the widespread, distribution of LSD and other hallucinogens. And now it's kind of being rediscovered. I know there were studies that took place and have been taking place throughout the past 50 or 60 years, but nowhere near what's going on right now. And the fact that, it's going back quite a while now when they finally loosened up on the research and we see these things are beneficial. I guess it creates a whole host of problems to the regulators there of you're letting the genie out of the bottle. The one thing I will say for like drug legalization is many health benefits have been espoused for cannabis, and really the research, what I've seen, other than perhaps some pain relief aspects and seizure reduction, I just haven't seen the research prove it out. Hallucinogens, on the other hand, most of these studies, and they haven't been extensive, have shown great benefits with, some risk, but moderate risk.
Agreed. I think people often try to draw parallels between cannabis and psychedelics, and there certainly are many, but there are many differences as well. My opinion is that in psychedelics, you actually kind of have the medical efficacy, which is kind of dragging psychedelics kicking and screaming into the mainstream. Whereas for cannabis, the medical efficacy was like maybe a tool to kind of legitimize recreational use. Whereas, we should have just said people should be free to use cannabis recreationally, and we don't need any pretend fake glaucoma prescriptions or anything like that, right? We should just let people smoke weed if they want to smoke weed, right? Like this is land of the free, supposedly, right? So, and so I would agree with you that many of the claimed medical benefits of cannabis definitely did not come to pass. Although it is important to remember that there are very important and highly efficacious cannabinoid-based drugs that are out on the market, right? But I would say that the cannabis market is perhaps 10%, maybe 5% therapeutic, 95% recreational. I would say for psychedelics, the other way around, right? It's going to be 90% therapeutic and probably 10% recreational.
And it's interesting because if you look in the drug books, cannabis is classified as an hallucinogen, but I don't know exactly what that means in the case of cannabis.
All the scheduling system is so ridiculously out of date, right? Like all these substances are Schedule 1 controlled substances, saying that they have a high potential for abuse and no accepted medical benefit. And both of those things are just completely untrue, right? You even have the FDA that designated psilocybin a breakthrough therapy, right? So it's ridiculous, honestly, and it's kind of embarrassing at the same time.
Sure. And before microdosing, there really were no long-term hallucinogen abusers out there. It's generally a thing that goes in a cycle, whatever, they take it. It's not a long-term abuse drug. So all of that's really fascinating. Hey, just tell us best place to find you, connect with you on the web, Ben.
Head to our website, filament.health. Sign up for our mailing list. Comes out usually every Thursday or every other Thursday. And obviously look us up on all of the normal social media channels, filament.health.
All right, excellent. And there's a link in the show notes to your website on financialsurvivalnetwork.com. And when you go there, sign up for your free newsletter. Ben, been a real pleasure. Thank you so much for coming by.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to Kerry Lutz's Financial Survival Network, your solution to today's trying times. For the latest, go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Financial Survival Network, now more than ever.